Here's an AI generated render. Looks pretty decent, right? Now here's another one with a very similar prompt. One of these looks like it came out of a real production pipeline. The other one looks like, well, AI made it. And I know you can feel the difference, but can you actually explain what's wrong? Because here's the thing. AI can now generate 3D renders, concept arts, full scenes in seconds. And a lot of them have this quality that just feels off. Not in an obvious way, but in a way you feel before you can put into words. And if you can't put it into words, you can't fix it. You're just rolling the dice and hoping that the next generation looks better. Now here's what's interesting. The things that make AI renders look wrong, they're the exact same mistake that beginner Blender artists make. And I'm serious. The same issues, the same tells, the same reason a render looks cheap even when the modeling is solid and the lighting setup looks fine on paper. And this is actually the real dividing line between beginner and someone who is hired. It's not the software, it's not even the render settings. It's whether you understand at a fundamental level how light physically behaves. Because when you do, you stop guessing. You look at a render, yours or an AI's, and you immediately know what is wrong and exactly how to fix it. That understanding is also what makes you better at prompting AI. Instead of just typing make it look more realistic, you can say specifically what is broken and what needs to change. And that specificity is the difference between getting something usable and going through 50 generations hoping that one sticks. So today, I want to walk you through the exact things that neither AI nor beginner Blender artists get right, and why understanding each one is what actually separates good work from great work. Look at this AI render. The lighting seems fine at first glance, but something feels flat, like everything is kind of floating, like the scene has no weight to it. Here's what's actually going on. Imagine any point on a surface. Above the point, there's a full hemisphere of directions that light can come from. If that point is sitting out in the open, most of that hemisphere is unobstructed. Lots of light reaches it. It is bright. Now push that point to a corner. Suddenly, the geometry around it is cutting off huge portions of that hemisphere. Fewer directions have a clear path to that point. So less light reaches it. It gets darker. That darkening in corners, in crevices, or anywhere where geometry gets tight is called ambient occlusion, and your brain uses it constantly. It is how you tell whether something is sitting on a surface or floating above it. It's how you read depth without even thinking about it. And AI consistently gets this wrong. Corners that should be darker are evenly lit. Objects look pasted into the scene rather than actually sitting in it. And beginner Blender artists make the exact same mistake because they either skip ambient occlusion entirely or crank it up randomly without understanding why it exists. Once you understand what it's actually doing, you'll never misuse it again. Okay, here's another AI render. The shadows look off, but can you tell me exactly why? They're actually too soft everywhere. Every single shadow in the scene has the same softness everywhere, regardless of where it falls. In reality, that's not how shadows work at all. Shadow softness depends on distance. A shadow right at the base of an object where it contacts the surface is sharp. As that shadow stretches further away, it gets softer and softer. This happens because light sources have physical size. They're not a single tiny point. So from a distance, part of the light source gets blocked while the rest does not. You get this gradual blurry edge on the shadow called the penumbra. Your brain has seen this your entire life. You walk outside, you look at shadows, you have internalized this relationship completely without ever consciously learning it. So when an AI puts uniform sharp shadows everywhere or uniform soft shadows everywhere, your brain immediately goes, something is wrong here, even when you have never heard the word penumbra in your life. Beginner Blender artists do the same thing. They pick a shadow softness value and leave it. They don't think about the relationship between distance and softness, and that one thing makes your renders look fake in a way that is really hard to put your finger on until you actually know what you're looking for. This one I touched on my last video, but it belongs here because it's one of the most common mistakes I see. When you photograph something microscopic, your camera has to be extremely close to it. At that distance, the physics of how light passes through a lens means depth of field becomes razor thin. Things go blurry almost immediately as they move away from the focus point. When you photograph something massive, a building, a landscape, a giant structure, you have to pull way back to fit it in frame. At that distance, the physics goes the other way. Most of the scene stays sharp. Your brain knows this. It has internalized the relationship between blur and scale so deeply that it uses blur as a cue for size even when there's nothing else in frame to reference. So when an AI generates a massive spaceship and gives it the depth of field of a macro photograph, your subconscious immediately reads it as small. The blur is lying about the scale, and beginner Blender artists do this all the time. They add depth of field because it looks cinematic without understanding that the amount of blur they are adding is actually communicating something specific about the size of what they're rendering. Look at this scene. The exposure is fine, the shadows are in the right places, but it feels cold and empty, like a stage set rather than a real space. What's missing is color bleed. Light does not just hit a surface and stop, it bounces. A red wall does not just look red, it throws red light onto the ceiling, onto the floor, onto anything nearby. Every surface in a real scene is receiving light from every other surface around it. The whole thing is this constant conservation of bouncing light and color. AI images often gets the direct lighting right, but misses all of that interaction. The bounce, the color spilling from one surface to another, the way a warm wooden floor throws a slightly orange tint onto the underside of a table, the way a blue sky makes shadows cooler than the lit areas. Without it, a scene feels like all the objects are isolated, like they exist in the same frame but not in the same world, and your brain reads that instantly. Beginner Blender artists miss this because in Eevee, it doesn't happen automatically, and even in cycles, people will set the bounce count too low or not think about it at all. Understanding why this exists will change how you light every single scene that you ever make. So look at what all four of these have in common. They're not technical errors. AI is not miscalculating something. These are failures of physical understanding. AI does not know why the corners are dark. It just knows that they often are. So when the geometry is unusual or the lighting is unconventional, it has to guess. And most of the time, it guesses wrong. A beginner Blender artist who does not understand these things also has to guess. They tweak values until something looks okay. They copy settings from a tutorial without knowing what the settings are actually doing. But once you understand the physics behind even just these four things, you stop guessing entirely. You look at any renders, yours, someone else's, an AI output, and you can see exactly what's wrong. You can describe it precisely and you can fix it deliberately. This is what gets you hired. This is what makes your work stand out. And this is what makes your AI prompts go from vague to surgical. I'm going to be making a full deep dive video on each of these: ambient occlusion, soft shadows, depth of field, and light bounce. Each one getting the full treatment with proper visualization so you can actually understand the physics and not just the settings. Because the goal is not to just make you better at clicking buttons in Blender. The goal is to change how you see. And once that changes, everything else follows. Your Blender work gets better, your AI prompts get better, your eyes get better. And that is the one thing that genuinely cannot be automated. If that's something you want, subscribe, because the next deep dive is gonna drop soon. And until that comes out, thank you so much for watching, keep creating, and don't forget to stay creative.